have some fun with format, but it's about taking that extra step when you're planning your content to think about what is the way that I can present this content that's going to be right for my audience, and not just rushing straight in. So just kind of saying, right, I'm going to take away and add one extra layer of thinking to create something that's really going to resonate with my audience. Hi, I'm Carla Dobson Elliott, and this is SEO in 2026 Additional Insights.
Carla, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
My number one SEO tip is that everyone should be having fun with formats. And by that, I mean not just thinking about, is it a video? Is it a piece of written content? It's taking it down to a slightly more granular level. Is it a how-to list? Is it a magazine-style quiz like you used to get in girls' magazines in the 90s? Is it a recipe? Is it a prescription? How can we display content in a way that really works for the topic we're creating content about, that really works for our audience, and that also just make things really nice and digestible and easy for search engines to see what it's about.
And I'm sure the reasons behind doing this isn't just to have fun, it's actually to deliver something valuable to clients or within the business that we're working in. So what is changing up the format of the content that we publish? What impact is that likely to have from a positive perspective?
So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important to have fun with it as well, but there's definitely some useful benefits to having fun with formats. I think giving something a really clear format and giving it really clear form makes a piece of content usable. So if you think about kind of what is probably the most famous format of all, which is a recipe, we all know what that looks like. Everyone who's listening now can probably think, yep, a recipe, it's a list of ingredients, it's a step-by-step guide of how to create something, and it's been roughly the same for hundreds of years. But actually, it's also just a usable piece of content. It works in terms of the flow. You gather your ingredients and then you go through working through the process methodically. And if content has a clear format that's been thought about, that's fit for purpose, that's right for the audience, it automatically makes that content more useful. And we know that useful content is absolutely the king, both in terms of audience engagement, but also happy audience equal happy search engines. And it's going to make you more likely to rank and come up in searches. And also then to keep your audience and encourage people to click through, which, as we know, in the kind of era of zero-click search, it's much harder to actually get people you can get a snippet of an answer without having to go on someone's website. But if you're providing that really useful, followable format, it's encouraging people to click through as well.
And how do you know your audience is happy?
I think there's loads of different ways you know your audience are happy. How long are they spending with the content? What are they going through? Are they taking the next step in their journey that you want them to? Are they engaging with the piece of content? Depending on what metrics you're looking at. But I think ultimately it's, are they then coming back to you again and again as a source? I think one of the other really amazing things about formats is that they offer consistency. And as much as we like to think maybe that we like lots of new and exciting things, there is a comfort in consistency. So if you as a brand are producing a weekly roundup every Friday, or much like this podcast, a top SEO tip for 2026, people know what they're expecting. They can go back to it again and again without having to go through that level of search. They'll put you as a preferred provider of information, and bookmark you or save you to their favourites, or something that will keep them coming back.
So I guess as a business nowadays, I mean, many marketers recommend or recognize that it's important to actually be known for something and not be everything to everyone. So how is a business to actually you select the type of content that you're going to be known for?
It's a really good question. I think it's ultimately that lovely Venn diagram, isn't it, of your business need and your brand and your personality and what suits you. So, and then also what your audience actually wants from you, and that lovely kind of sweet spot in the middle where it's something that reflects your brand personality. So if you're a fun, quirky brand, you might want to lean into formats that are more, quizzes, they're gamified, they're a little bit unexpected, but it has to also serve and meet that audience's needs and ultimately give them the information that they would be coming to you for. It's just maybe in a slightly more engaging way than just another blog that, kind of looks the same as hundreds and thousands of other blogs that have been released that week.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on different types of content in terms of would you incorporate audio or video within your content as well? Or is it best to actually just focus on one type of content for a page?
I think, again, like your format allows you to think about that really clearly rather than just kind of saying, oh, we must have some video or we must have some audio or we must have an infographic in this. It allows you to kind of take that step back and think, what are we trying to achieve? What does the audience need? What is the ultimate kind of purpose of this piece of content and what best suits it? So actually, yeah, you absolutely might have a how-to video as well as a written step-by-step guide, because then you're serving people who engage with content in either way. I mean, I personally I always want a written list, which is probably why I'm a writer. You know, I want to follow a written step-by-step guide, but I know that I work with people who will only watch instruction videos. They don't want to kind of take information in with the written word.
So can you tell me a little bit about how you actually go about selecting the type of audience that you decide you want to serve?
Yeah, I mean, at Sticky, we encourage clients to profile audiences and segment audiences in a slightly different way than kind of maybe traditional demographics, which have been used for years. I think as, you know, we know people are changing, the way we live our lives is changing. So you might be, say, for example, targeting a first-time mother, but she could be 20 or 45, very, very different demographics, but very much interested in maybe the same type of content and information, but also facing the same kind of challenges, i.e. they're time poor, they're up late in the night, so wanting content in the same format. So rather than segmenting audiences by demographics, we encourage brands to segment their audience by their curiosity type. So based on kind of 70 years of academic research into curiosity, we've devised 6 different curiosity cohorts, which kind of profile the different ways in which people are curious. So there's a clarity seeker who really likes simple, swift answers. You know, they don't want loads and loads of detail or complicated journeys. They just want the information that they need served to them in a really simple way. So in terms of formats, a lovely little flowchart or a comparison table, something that gives them kind of maximum impact for minimum effort would be really useful for them. At the other end of the spectrum, you have your exhilaration hunter who really likes things that kind of test the senses, challenge their boundaries, make them think about things in a different way. So they might like a format that's surprising for the brand or has like an element of gamification or is a little bit more challenging of their boundaries. And then another profile is the socio-eco empath, which is what I am. And we are really interested in kind of human stories and connection. And so therefore, you know, a sort of case study and a story of a customer or someone who's used a product or service is what would appeal to us.
So how do you actually determine who your audience is?
I mean, that can be done in different ways. I guess obviously we work with brands and we take information about their audience that they would have. And then we overlay that with data from what we call our curiosity engine, which helps us then take their audience's profile and determine them into what's their primary curiosity type. There is also a quiz that people can take if they head to the Sticky website to find out their own curiosity type. So you can let me know yours later, David.
Surely it's not the case where all of your audience is the same type. So can you actually tailor your content towards multiple types?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, 100%. If you take the example of like a bank, the reality is that they serve lots of different people. So they'll probably have all curiosity types within their audience set. They might have a few primary, depending on their kind of branding and their positioning as a brand that makes them appeal to certain curiosity types. But the reality is they probably want content across touch points that suit all the different curiosity types. So then we'd recommend a mix. But I think it's that kind of golden rule, isn't it? Of if you create something for everybody, it ends up resonating with no one. So it's more, right, we're going to create X pieces of content. This one's going to be tailored for clarity seekers and it's going to be in this format. This one's going to be tailored for a socio-eco empath. And so you're making sure that you're kind of creating content that resonates with the breadth of your audience.
So when you create a piece of content for a particular personality, how do you know that that right type of person is likely to engage with that piece of content? If you're targeting a clarity seeker, what happens if another personality type lands on that page? Is that not likely to result in a more negative bounce or signal to what you're attempting to achieve?
Yeah, I think that's very important. It's important to have multiple different elements woven into your format on kind of key landing pages and key product pages if you feel like you've got a breadth of, different audiences that you're appealing to. And as with anything, there's an element of test and learn. I think certainly with a lot of the brands we've worked with, we've definitely found that their audiences have maybe profiled into 2 or 3 dominant curiosity types. So making sure that we've got elements on key content, key pages or key content that appeals to those different types is really important. I think also there's an element of nothing is 100% with marketing, is it? It's test and learn. It's seeing what resonates with your particular audience and then evolving and iterating until you get the right mix.
Great. Okay. And is this woven into every type of content? So would it be woven into product pages as well as blog posts and other pieces of content on your website?
Yeah, I mean, I think just sort of take it back to formats a bit. I think you should be thinking about the format of every piece of content. It's just that kind of extra step. So you start to write a products page, but actually thinking, how do we want this to be used? How can we make it work for our audience? And thinking about every sort of element. And then I think it's about creating kind of consistent rules and guidelines as well. That can be really granular. It can be right down to, every header should be no more than X characters because we know our audience likes things really short and snappy. And then once you've created those rules in that format, not only do you have that sort of great level of consistency, it's much more efficient to produce content as well because everyone's got a really clear idea of what things need to look like, what they need to achieve, and what you put in place to help you achieve your content goals. So if you're working with a broad content team, or you've got different people inputting, it just makes it much easier.
And is it better to just focus on publishing new content or do a major content audit and determine the content you've got on your website and actually do a better job of positioning that content to your target audience before moving on and publishing new content?
I love a content audit, and I'm a massive believer in using what you've already got if it works. I think if you're a brand who hasn't really thought about form as a key part of content, then a really great starting point is to go back and see what you've got. And it might be that all of the information that you've got is brilliant. It just needs kind of reformatting, making more consistent and updating, and also testing different formats to see what resonates, see if it has a positive impact on your metrics. And then obviously doing a bit of gap analysis to see, what you're potentially missing as well. And I think, again, when you've got those kind of repeatable formats, when you've got content that's really, really tailored to your audience, it's easier to see what you're missing and what you might need to create, and also to have that structure where you're able to create what you need quite quickly and efficiently.
Superb. And is what you're advocating different compared with what's worked in the past? Because obviously everything to a certain degree stays the same in marketing, but things evolve in SEO and what actually works in terms of targeting and bringing in traffic changes. So is the way that you're recommending targeting content towards these 6 key audience types, has that changed much over the years?
I think this is a really different, when it comes to sort of the targeting piece, I think that is really different. And to my knowledge, sticky the only people who are doing it by curiosity, and it's kind of born out of changing consumer needs. Different, we're bombarded with so much content now that actually something that feels really personal, that piques your curiosity, that encourages you to do one more scroll, one more click, I think is increasingly important in the marketing landscape. But I think on the kind of format point, format's been around for a very long time, and I think it's one of the kind of hallmarks of just that best practice content creation that sometimes isn't maybe used or focused on as much as it should be, but it's something that's kind of evolved with the times. So it's in my experience been incredibly good for SEO, but I think there's a real place for it as well in the kind of search everywhere landscape when you're having to start think about kind of different touch points. Are people searching via social? So you need this kind of repeatable format to go on those channels as well, but also to give that kind of more engaging level of content that actually encourages people onto your website and to explore deeper, which I know is something that brands are really keen to do in a kind of zero-click world.
And of course, people consume content on AI search engines nowadays, and many places off a website. So is the advice that you're talking about applicable for there as well? Or Do you need to be a little bit more consistent and not think of specific audiences so much when you're thinking about content that gets published elsewhere?
I think in terms, I mean, at the heart of it is content that's kind of on websites and own channels, and obviously that's then found in different places and distilled in different ways by your kind of AI engines and things. But for me, having that strong form to a piece of content in the same way that it makes it more scannable and accessible to a human audience, it makes it more scannable and accessible and easy for, AI engines to kind of scrape websites and see what it is you're about and pull element into the answers that they're compiling.
Carla, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
I think my key takeaway is, back to my original point, have some fun with format, but it's about taking that extra step when you're planning your content to think about what is the way that I can present this content that's going to be right for my audience, and not just rushing straight in. So just kind of saying, right, I'm going to take away and add one extra layer of thinking to create something that's really going to resonate with my audience.
Carla Dobson Elliott is Director of Editorial Content at Sticky. Find out more over at sticky.co.uk. Carla, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thank you for having me.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at seoin2026.com.